Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia and this is the conclusions. And for the previous day and some opinions about the current situation in the war. And I don't think I will go into Kursk again. During the frontline changes report, I did do the conclusions together. So situation largely is the same. The latest geolocation I saw, which I have not mapped onto the map, show Russian forces in Lyubimovka already. Over here, the Russian forces have actually arrived inside of Lyubimovka. So this is the latest information, which I have not mapped it in yet. This is based on geolocation. So the situation largely is the same. The Russian forces in the Kursk region is on the counter-offensive over on the western flank, and the Ukrainians are counter-attacking. And this situation is already mapped into the Ukrainian mapping. They have reflected this area as a gray zone, but yeah, largely I don't think there's more breaking information per se. So I want to talk about more important fronts, because Kursk generally I don't think is very that important. Is the result of a Kursk offensive is a foregone conclusion. The Ukrainians can't possibly hold a position. So I want to really talk about the other front lines. And I think just to to share my opinions about the Voleda region, the Donetsk front. For maybe some people have never saw me talk about this before. Currently, the situation is quite bad. The Russian forces is now attacking towards Zolotaneva. They're trying to capture this town to secure the front line. So they want to secure the front line and all the way back to where the pre-Ukrainian counteroffensive line, it looks something like this. So I think the Russians are currently needing to take Zolotaneva first, and that will give them a strong foundations for them to then launch any new offensive northward, perhaps Shtaske, perhaps Novoyukrenka. But my current bet is that the Russians will go for Novoyukrenka. This will be the first target, along with Bohov-Yefelenka from the Vodiane direction in the pincer movement. So the current situation is that the Russians are still on the way to capture Zolotaneva to do what I meant by flattening the front line first. So they are not going for Novoyukrenka just yet. But however, on the eastern part, we are seeing the Russians already making this push. In the Vodiane region, they have attacked and taken the coal mine tree, the South Donbass coal mine tree, and they are basically strengthening the front line south of Vodiane. So this situation is quite difficult. The Ukrainians did try to hold a defense here in this industrial zone, but immediately they got airstrike. Like you can see one of these geolocation is an airstrike on them, so there is no way for the Ukrainians to hold any defensive positions, because once you hold a defense, airstrikes is caught and then you die, and this makes it impossible to convince any of your defenders to defend any position. So you can't really create a fortified position, because you would just be a target for airstrike. And the Ukrainians actually is seemingly severely lacking in air defense. They have no air-to-air defensive capability. Like, they can't send in fighters to fight the fighter jets, because even the F-16 is actually outclassed by the Russian fighters. And so, which means that the Ukrainians actually have no means of stopping any Russian aircraft from dropping bombs, with the exception of maybe S-300s and Patriots. And even for these surface-to-air missile systems, these are prime targets that the Russians are using their drones to actively hunt for. And I think by this moment, I think the Ukrainians are really in the state of severe lack of surface-to-air missiles systems. And they lost a lot in the Kursk region, which is why the Kursk region is really cursed. Like, they really cursed the Ukrainians, like, to make their military situation even worse. They have lost so much HIMARS, so much M270, so much artillery systems, so much surface-to-air missile systems for the Kursk offensive, because they really sent in all they have, all the good stuff. And the current result is that after 1 month of holding the line, the Russians is now on the counteroffensive, and they are taking grounds on a daily basis. So it's quite of a disaster. And so the Russians are now going to, I believe this pincer will happen, and this will allow the Russians to not need to attack Voleda head on, because Voleda is like a fortress. You can see this looks like a massive fortress, and despite the Russians have endlessly bombed this place, they have bombed, artillery shelled, they really threw a lot of things at this location. The Ukrainians still are holding it. So the Russians, in their previous experience of attacking Voleda, has always been pretty bad. A lot of people died in the attempt to attack Voleda. So I think the Russians are going to avoid going for that for now, I believe. I believe they're going to go for the pincer, force the Ukrainians into a withdrawal, like what we have seen in many, many other places. So one of these many other places is, of course, the Nevelsky region, where the Ukrainians are probably on the retreat right now, and they are reforming the line. Tentatively, they are holding a defense line over at Khernik, Zelenopole, Pershi, as well as Ukraine's region. So the Russians are attacking in this area here, and the Russians are pushing towards Ostrivsky, which is one of the more interesting development over the past few days. This is a shocking development. I never expected the Russians to go for a massive rush towards Alexandropil and Horstry. This is a massive shock to me. I thought that they will make progress, but not this fast. So we will continue to monitor. Tentatively, there's no more news regarding the situation at Horstry at this moment, or at least not since I've done the situation report. So let's see how this develop. The fact that the Russians managed to land troops in Horstry means that the Georgievka region is going to start to close up to straighten the front line soon. So it's going to, a lot of things is going to change around here, and then which means, tactically speaking, or if the Russians take this line, then they are just a mere 5-6 kilometers away from Kurakove, which is the Ukrainian HQ in the operations around this area here. So this is going to be a big threat, and if Kurakove falls, then I think everything south of the Kurakove is going to be in danger. I think the Ukrainians is going to do a mass withdrawal from this area here. I think they will just do that if the Russians manage to capture this much ground, because this entire line is just undefendable at this rate. So yeah, so that, because that will be just look like this. Let me show you. So it will look something like this. By the time where the Russians take Kurakove, then the Ukrainians will then stuck in this salient, very long logistic lines, and impossible to hold this position. So Voleda will probably fall. So yeah, this is just very, very complicated for defensive position. So the Ukrainians would have to fall back and go along this line, probably. So, but anyway, we shall see how this develop. What I'm talking now is just months in the future, not so fast. The Russians also seems to have restarted the Pokrovsk offensive. So after some days of stoppage, where the Ukrainians conducted counter-offensive actions, at Novohorodivka, the Zuravka region, some clashes at Horodivka, the Russians are now pushing out of Novohorodivka again. This time round, the target seems to be the highway in this region. The Russians could most likely also go for Lysivka. Then in this area here, the Russians could actually continue westward and capture the railway from the top, attack backwards into Selidove. So there is a possibility, because I don't think they will go for Pokrovsk immediately. I don't think so, not yet, because the Russians will not go for a head-on attack against such a big target. This is what I think. So the Russians would have to clear out the Yaya regions and also Horodivka before they go for Minograd, and then from this area, then they can go for Pokrovsk, and then you can have the pincer. So this is what I think. But this is an interesting development. The Ukrainians, interestingly, is able to put up some kind of counter-offensive, which is also interesting. So the Ukrainians are really trying their best. So don't diss them. They are really very sad. Their country got invaded. People die. So it's quite bad. So not much news in the New York region. The biggest news was the reinforcement by the Azov brigade. So far the front line is quite static, particularly over in the Nelipivka region. The Russians are still trying to push Donetsk, Druzhba, Pivnichne, but no, with very few success. The success is very small. Frontline changes, yes, but very little bit. And then we have some developments around the southern flank of the Bakhmut front. Russian forces have some advancement in the west, in the northwest or west of Kostiantynivka, so that's interesting to me. So this is interesting, but not much. It doesn't change the strategic situation a lot. Tactically, yes, it does change some things, and it's also unsure if the Russians have the entire line of the trees, or they are just attacking and taking some small spots. So things are still pretty unclear. So we just continue to wait and see. The south of Grigorivka, of course, is also interesting. The Russians attack the heavy entrenchment, probably capturing it. So this will allow the Russians to attack Kharkovivka from two different directions, from the rear and in the front. So this will allow easier capture of the settlement. So yeah, so let's see. It's unclear if the Ukrainians have or the Russians have this forest south of the geolocation though. So we shall see. I think after that, the rest of the Austro fronts is pretty boring. I don't think there's much to talk about. Yeah. So anyway, this is just a very short conclusions because I don't want to go too deep into the Kursk. I already mentioned it largely already during the Frontline Changes report. So anyway, this is just some thoughts about the general strategic situation. So do press the like button, subscribe. If you feel that my voice sounds weird because I start to fall sick today, I started to feel something weird during the morning when I was doing the mapping. So by now it's getting worse. So let's see how this goes. Maybe it's the lack of sleep. So immune system is down, so the virus got through. Whatever it is, it's the Russians' fault. I'll see you guys in the next update.